Hello friends, it's your boy Eddie, back at you with more long-form content. So, in my last Elder Scrolls video, I said that the next video I make for the Elder Scrolls, if I make one, will probably be sort of like an intro guide. This is not what that is. This is a crackpot theory. So, I've never heard anyone else have this sort of theory online, so today, that's what we're going to be going over. So, get our tinfoil hats and jump right into this, because my theory, my little crackpot headcanon, is I think that Ariel was actually complicit and actively maybe had some orchestration, or if not orchestration, then at least passive standby in the corruption of Trinamac via Boethia. So let's get into it without further ado. Just needed to adjust my tinfoil hat a little bit. So this is the part of the video where unfortunately I do have to give a little context. So if you've never consumed anything with the Elder Scrolls before, this is not a starting video for you, okay? Go play a game, watch some lore videos, I don't care. Just get familiar with the content before you watch this. This is not a good starting point. Anyways, our story starts in the Dawn era, the era when the gods still walk the earth, right? Now, the chief of the Elven gods at this point is Ariel, as it is throughout the rest of history. Duh. But despite him being the chief god, this big old sun god, time god, Akatosh, what have you, right? Despite being chief, he is not the most popular. The most popular, that honor, it goes to Trinamac. Trinamac is his champion. He's this buff warrior god who was the guy who ripped out Lorkharn's heart during the war between him and Lorkharn. And anyways, that's not really what this is about. Well, it's about Trinamac, but that's not what we're getting at. We're going to skip to the Velothia Exodus, right? When Veloth, the prophet Veloth, led a bunch of Altmer off the Somerset Isles to follow the teachings of Boethia and some of the other good Daedra, right? Now, as we learn in Maluk Orkchild, Trinamac goes to stop them as one of Ariel's champions, and we get this passage.
Trinamac confronted Boethia for this trespass and was challenged to battle. Trinamac was about to strike a mighty blow when Mephala appeared and stabbed him in the back. As Trinamac kneeled, wounded by Mephala's treachery, Boethia gloated and cast a terrible ritual to scar and twist his appearance, then cast him into a place of choking air and ash. Trinamac, enraged by his failure, was reborn in blood, and he sliced open his own chest, tearing the shame from his spirit. Maluk, god of curses, rose from the ash and cursed Boethia for his malice. On that day, Maluk spoke the code to his faithful, and swore vengeance against all those who would break it. And thus, the orcs were born of blood, the blood of Maluk.
But that reading had a very nice interpretation or wording of what happened to poor old Trinamac, right? Because in most interpretations, they say that Boethia literally shat him out, which isn't that great in my opinion. But this is a pretty good creation myth for the orcs, all things considered. But something that's always struck me as odd about this is, where was Ariel during this? There's a massive cultural divergence. I mean, sure, he's sending Trinamac as a great champion, but this is definitely the time for Ariel to show up in all of his glory. So, that's a little odd. And that, for me at least, is where this conspiracy really begins.
Please! Turn on the TV to hit the Pentagon!
So almost immediately, this creation myth for the orcs strikes me as a little odd. And understand why it strikes me as a little odd, you need to understand a little something about the High Elves. They view themselves as very close to their ancestors. They view themselves as the truest elves, the most pure, the closest descended, right? That kind of stuff. They view themselves as these perfect, pure, closest to the gods we can kind of be sort of things. And everyone else, somewhere along the line, diverge. Like, you look at the Wood Elves, they started worshipping Y'ffre, all that weird stuff with the Green Pact. That's not our worldview. The Dark Elves, they just bailed on us to worship the good Daedra. Not great, right? But what the hell did the orcs do, right? I mean, they just worshipped a god despite his humiliation, who was already widely popular. That seems like the most high elven thing ever. Stick with it no matter what, right? And another thing, once again, already brought it up, where the hell was Ariel? I mean, this is definitely the time for him to come in all of his grandeur, all of his splendor, at the moment of a great cultural divergence, if he wanted to stop it. Why did he send Trinamac? Is he stupid? Is he dumb? Why did he do that? Well, I personally believe that Ariel knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly that the orcs would be ostracized for this, and he planned it from the beginning. Now, you might be asking yourself, Eddie, what would Ario have even to gain from this, right? Causing two great cultural divergences that would ultimately dilute his worship? What's up with that? And to get into that, I first need to explain the concept of a Kalpa. Now, when you think of Ariel or Akatosh, you probably think of him as the head honcho, the chief of the divines, right? But that's not always the case. And to explain what I mean by that, I need to explain what a Kalpa is, as I said like 15 seconds ago. A Kalpa is basically another cycle of the world. So when the world starts, it starts off in this section called the Dawn Era, and it loops down to the middle section. As it ramps up again, it almost slingshots back up to a Dawn Era again. Kind of a complicated concept. I'll just put a diagram up here so you understand what it is, but basically a Kalpa is a different cycle of the world, right? As we learn in the Mythic Dawn Commentaries, Volume 4, the previous Kalpa of the world was a place called Blig, which was ruled by tyrant Dreg Kings. It was only overthrown when Mehrunes Dagon came and overthrew the whole thing, because that's his shtick, right? So, that's what we know about the last Kalpa, and Blig is kind of weird in general because it's also an adjacent place, like I said. It might be a Kalpa, it kind of is, sort of is. That's not important. What you need to know is that in the 36 Lessons of Avec, in Sermon 28, sorry, I had to check my notes for that, so sue me. In Sermon 28, we learned that Molag Bal, that Daedric prince, he was actually the chief god. He was the head honcho of this realm, right? And when the Kalpa ended after Mehrunes Dagon reset the Kalpic cycle, by some stroke of luck, Ariel actually ended up rising into power. So, now that we have all of these pieces into place, I can finally explain the entirety of my theory, the through lines, and then maybe present some evidence? We'll see. One last little bit of info. In the Elder Scrolls universe, myth makes reality. A god's power is powered, of course, by their worship that they get, right? Now, we can tie things all together. My personal theory is that Ariel, chief of the divines, like in his new position, sees Trinimac getting a little bit more popular than him. He's getting a bit concerned because if he gets worshipped more, it threatens his place as chief of the divines, right? He's not a big fan of that. So, he sees Boethia, he sees the Chimer, he sees them all leaving, and he sees his chance to rid himself of a metaphysical opponent, right? So he sends Trinimac to go and deal with them. Of course, Trinimac is deformed, disgraced, humiliated, and instead of taking compassion on his old comrade, instead, Ariel goes, these are orcs, these idiots, these losers, they're no longer welcome here. They're not one of us anymore, right? And in that case, by creating both these cultural divisions, he secures his own worship, while allowing for worship of Trinimac to slowly sort of fade out, because they're all orcs now, they're all outcasts. Now, I know what you're saying. It's a pretty cool theory, Eddie. Got any more evidence beside these loosey-goosey sort of through lines and...
In terms of
Evidence.
we have no money.
Evidence.
This is just a pet theory. I have no evidence for it, really. But, you know, it's still a fun one, and I think it adds a couple of layers of depths to these characters. So to wrap this up, I think that Ariel basically colluded with Boethia. That's, you know, being the least generous I could, either colluded with or just sort of saw an opportunity and took it to rid himself of a metaphysical opponent so he could maintain a majority of his worshippers during Malacath's corruption. And that's the reason why the orcs are ostracized, and that's why I think that Ariel is at least partially responsible for the fate of the orcs, right? Once again, not a lot to back it up, but a lot of fun. I still like the theory. I'm going to take this off since I'm no longer doing crackpot theories. Now, Kestrel just uploaded a video. You should go watch that. Watch all of his playthroughs. They're all wonderful. And I got 2 more videos in the works. One is like a Brandon Sanderson fantasy review, also reviewing one of Kestrel's fan fictions at the same time. It's been in production for a bit, but I'm finally getting to working on it, so that's nice. And then I actually have a video that I put any amount of effort into. The works, it's like a horror video essay kind of thing. You'll see what I'm talking about soon. Soon, I say. But that's basically going to be one of the higher quality videos I do, because all the videos I've done on this channel actually have been very, very low effort. So yeah, no, get ready for that. As always, it's Eddie. Like, subscribe, all that good junk. See ya.